Pozdrav, welcome back. Now this is a sanding tutorial, and in this video I'm going to show you how I go about sanding bowls, boxes, spindle work as well as flat surfaces, and I'm going to cover some of the common mistakes that all of us do as well as solutions. And the sanding process doesn't have to be a long or tedious process, so it can be enjoyable. So stay tuned and hopefully this will help you out. So as promised, this is sort of a follow-up video on my sponsorship reveal with Klingspor, and in this video I'm going to show how I sand bowls inside and outside, flat surfaces here, so for let's say cutting boards or trays to keep them nice and flat and remove the concentric rings. And also, let's say this could be box base or a lid, so how to sand the end grain and side grain to make them nice and clean. And also generic spindle work. So we have a cylinder here portion, bead, coves, and all that fun stuff. So sanding doesn't have to be difficult. It's not really difficult, but you have to pay attention to a few of the key points. And in this video I'm going to show you, in my opinion, what those are. So before we continue on, let me just show you our medium, the sandpaper and other accessories like drills, attachments and so on to help you out in this process. So I think this could be quite interesting for you to see how I store and organize my sandpaper, and this is nothing special. So let me just get the drawer out. So if there is a need, I can take all of the drawer out and use it like this, but usually I keep it there and I pull the sandpaper out. So this is not very much organized, but works for me quite well. And I have here the discs, so 75 mil diameter, 120, 180, 240, and on this side 320, and 400 is newest addition. Usually I sand up to 320 grit. Now in these cubbies here I have 120, again 180, 240 and 320 in clothback sandpaper, and here is 400 grit. And if there is some stubborn grain or anything like that, there is 80 grit clothback sandpaper as well here. I also keep here the sanding pads, which I'm going to show you in a few seconds as well. And these used from the last, let's say, bowl that I've done, I keep those in one of these cubbies, and when the other bowl is made, I can still use these if they are okay. So in this case 180 is still okay, 240 as well, and 320 as well is okay. And I like to keep them stacked in order, so 180, 240 and 320, and if I've used 400 then that will be on the top, so that way I know when I pull these out, I know which are which, so just in case if there is no number on the back here. So again, those live in one of the cubbies here, and let me just get this out of the way and I'll show you all the accessories that I use. Now this is pretty much everything that I use for sanding. Now some of these are extras, let's say, so let's go from the right to the left. And this is the newest addition from Klingspor, this sanding pad. Now obviously you don't have to use this, but this is really nice creature comfort. Instead of this you can use one of these. So I have a little softer pad for contours or sponge, and this is high density foam, so it's really nice and rigid, and you can wrap the sandpaper around this and use it on the flat surfaces. So this is another one that I've been asked a few times. This is really Frankenstein looking thing. So I have a rod here and a piece of dowel with a slot here, so I can place the sandpaper inside the slot and wrap it around, and now I can sand, let's say, deep stuff like pencil pots or something like that where you can't reach with your fingers. So this is much better used for that. And again, you can easily swap the sandpaper. Probably one of the most asked thing to make on the video is this. This is my homemade inertia sander, which you probably see in pretty much every my video on cross grain work. So all this is a threaded rod on a bought pad with a couple of washers and spacers to make this spin nice and freely, and works really lovely. It's probably one of my most used accessories for sanding and really does the job really nice. Now what I have here is an assortment of pads, 75mm and 50mm as well, and some of the interfaces as well. Now I rarely use these. For instance, these are a little bit too stiff, so if you want to keep let's say nice and flat portion on the bowl, box or anything, this could come in handy, but I don't like this when I need to sand the curves. Just find these a little bit, let's say, awkward to use. These two are actually quite good. These are my oldest pads. This one has worn out, but just wanted to show you. This one still works, hook and loop, and you can glue a new piece of hook and loop here as well if you want. Now these are perfect because these does have a little give, and they work much better in my opinion. This one is a little bit stiffer and this one is a little bit softer. So again, these work quite lovely. These 50mm I don't use all that much. I find that wherever I can sand with 75mm pad like this, if it's too big, then I hand sand it, so I don't find the need for this, although I have them just in case if I do have the need. Now usually with this kind of stiffer pads you get interfaces like this, and you can buy these and put it on your regular pads to sort of keep these more prolonged, more life in them, but I find these to be very like squishy, and I just don't like using these, and in my experience these just worn out really quickly. What usually happens is when you pull the sandpaper out, you just inevitably tear the hook and loop here and destroyed it in just a few uses. At least that's in my case. So I don't use these 50mm, although nothing wrong with using them. I use primarily 75mm, and this is what I think quite inexpensive but also really a useful thing to have in your shop. And this is a rubber for cleaning out sandpaper. So you can see here the sandpaper is a little bit clogged, so you can use it to clean it up. You see that does the job quite nicely, and you can use it probably one more time to sand. Now this was the topic of many questions as well. This is angled drill. This is not your angle grinder, this is angle drill from Makita, and works really lovely. I find this to be much more useful and user friendly than the pistol grip drills. Now obviously these have the range here, so you can't sand let's say really enclosed deep vessel or hollow forms or anything like that, so the pistol grip might work better in that kind of situation. But these, on the most stuff that I do, this works really lovely, and I grip it around here, and with my pinky I squeeze the trigger, and this has the variable speed as well and works really lovely. Now there is a model with a chuck key which might work a little bit better because it's shorter, so you can control it even better, but this one works really lovely. Now these two pads here that you see, the white ones, are the best pads that I've ever used. Now I've used from quite expensive brands, let's say, and also from more renowned Turner, let's say, but I haven't found any better pads than these two here. And I bought these around 5-6 years ago, and these are still going strong without any issue, and really like these. So, but I did this morning try to find these so I could put the link for you, but I could not find them anymore. So pretty much everything is now mostly like these here. So can't find these anymore. If I do find, or if you know where to buy this kind of, and you can see how much give these have, so it's sort of a medium pad. It's not super squishy, but it's not stiff as well. So if you do know where to buy these days, so please let me know. Again, this is everything that I use. You don't have to have all this stuff. You can go about just with the hand sanding, but all of these you'll see in this video, and these all have purpose in my book. So sandpaper I'll be using is from Klingspor brand, and these are really nice, really quality sandpaper. Now there are other quality brands out there as well that really does the job quite well. I've used in the past this cloth bag, but it was sort of cancelled, or the company that was selling it here in Croatia did not sell it anymore, so I have to find another brand. And these paper bag I also use quite a lot, but these I could not buy them locally anymore. This is great alternative if you just want to grab your sandpaper off the shelf. These are quite common in big box stores. So again, PS33. And if you want to go paper style like this, these are really nice and quality sandpaper. It doesn't flake off. So what I mean by that is when you bend them, let's say in half, they don't break the grit here like on many other brands. If you only have access to these, I highly recommend it. Now, some of the other options here, these are creature comforts. Let's go with that. You can do pretty much everything with only one of these, and maybe let's go with these pads for ball sanding on the inside. That's usually my goal. I usually sand by hand on the outside of balls and pretty much any other stuff, turnings, and I use the pads for the inside because these help you out sand and smooth out any imperfections that eye or hand doesn't feel or see. So again, you don't have to use 4 types of sandpaper. You can just use these or something in this fashion, and you can cut or stamp out your own sandpaper. Glenn Lucas sells the stamp that you just whack it with a hammer and punches out the sandpaper the right size for you, or you can cut it up with the scissors or the scalpel or whatever the means is to get these smaller pads. Again, you can use these as like so for majority of the sanding by hand. Again, I use this creature comfort pad, let's say, for the flat stuff, and the most used sandpaper is this cloth bag because it's super flexible but also stiff enough so it doesn't sort of dig in on flat surfaces, let's say. So it's a really good one, and it holds up in terms of sandpaper life quite long, so that's important stuff for me as well. So now, just before I start sanding, a little note on safety. You are responsible for your own safety, so wear a dust mask or respirator, dust extractor, obviously. In my opinion, I cannot work with a dust mask or anything like that, so I'm firmly believing in collecting the dust at the source. So the closest possible to the work I'm sanding, I want the dust to be picked up. So what I'm using here is what I call roughen hood. So this has the right wing movable, adjustable, let's say, for a longer spindle, and I have a longer lid if I need to change this. But this usually works really nice. The shelf on top also blocks the air, so this is sort of contained, and this will pick up 95-99% dust. really on the big turnings, then I try to redirect or sanding at the different spots, so I redirect the dust inside. But usually this will pick up the dust even from around at this area of the big platter or plate. So I would recommend highly to get the biggest you can dust extractor. That will really benefit you, especially on sanding process, and it won't be dusty so much and everything, so it will be much more pleasurable. So let's start with the easiest, let's say, the spindle work. And now, as you can see here, we have a lot of fine details, which is sort of a benefit of hand turning instead of like copy lathes. Because we can get these nice crisp corners, and I want to keep it like that. So in this case, what I would use is either of these two options, so paperback or cloth back sandpaper. Now this is fine enough. We can probably start with 240 grit, but I'm going to start with 180 grit. Now this is where the paperback from Klingspor, this one really shines, because you can use it in single layer like this, and you can place it and manipulate with your finger to get into these fine corners and just rub it lightly. Now, I should point out that if you want to have easy sanding without too much trouble and short sessions of sanding with nice crisp details, the tool finish is important as well. So that's why a lot of my videos you've seen me go through a lot of trouble to get the best possible surface straight from the tool. That's why I make videos on scrapers, how to get the best possible surface, on gouges as well, because that will save you a lot of time, save you a lot of money, because you won't use a lot of sandpaper, and overall it will be much more enjoyable process. So now what I would suggest before we start is to sort of get familiar with bending or folding the sandpaper. Now in some cases you see me use a single layer like this paperback, because we can really sand up to really tight corner. However, what that does will destroy your sandpaper really quickly, because there is no way where to heat to go. The heat is the major problem or the biggest enemy of sandpaper, and the way we fold, and that's the reason why we fold the sandpaper, so go with backside to backside first, and then the final fold is backside to grit here, and that way you don't destroy the grit on grit fold, you don't destroy the grit itself, and this way now you have a little bit more pad, and also the heat can dissipate a little bit better. Now when we actually do start to sand, what you want to avoid is having the sandpaper at the same spot on the paper and the wood holding there for too long. So you always move sandpaper around, so going from this section to this, then here, then cove, and so on, and you always move the sandpaper as well. That way you reduce the amount of heat as well, especially on bowls. You can get surface checks from heat if you hold on a particular spot for too long. Also, where you position the sandpaper is also important, because you have to be aware if the spindle rotates towards ourselves, so at the top it wants to drag it down, so you have to be aware of that motion. So you have to either contradict that, and what I like to do is you can hold your hand beneath the spindle and above, and that way you're now sanding on this side, and you actually can see what you're sanding. If I'm placing the sandpaper like here, then I don't see what I'm sanding, if that makes sense. So also what you can do is place the sandpaper underneath here. You can now see as well what you're sanding, and the dust can be redirected to the dust hood here. So another key point I want to mention is the speed of the turning. Now usually I sand at the speed I'm turning. However, if I feel that the sandpaper is sort of gliding over the surface and I see polishing effect, that means usually I'm turning the lathe on way too fast. So I want to turn the speed down until I feel the resistance between the wood and the sandpaper. So you want to feel that the wood is sort of dragging the sandpaper, and you'll feel that the moment you hit the right speed, let's say. And there's not right speed, at least in my opinion, for sanding, and we'll get to that a little bit later as well. So the sanding process, and we'll have to turn on the dust extractor. So again, you're constantly moving the sandpaper. I'm holding it underneath with my 3 fingers as a sort of a straight line or a pad, so we can sand the flat portion like this, or you go up here. Again, I'm holding it with my left hand, and with my right hand I'm redirecting where I'm sanding. Now that's the easy stuff, the flat spot. Now let's go with the bead here. Again, you can fold it like so. I'm doing this motion, show you from this angle, and place it in the groove here. And like I said, we can use this in a single layer. You can pretty much use any paper like this, but now I can sort of feel any shape that I'm sanding, and I can push the sandpaper inside. You can see here the crease. Also on this little detail, you can see how here how the sandpaper is molded to the profile here. And we can sand the cove here. So for this short burst of sanding, again, you want to change the position of sandpaper, constantly moving, and again, we can fold it if we want. And on this section, just for the sake of the video, we'll use the cloth back as well. So here is important, we have a little burnish mark, and I want to sand that away, but don't want to lose the crispness of the corner. So I can go from this side as well. Also, I'm not pushing real hard into the wood, but also you don't want to be loose on the surface, so moderate pressure, let's say. And again here, the paper back, sandpaper is a little bit thinner, so we can really go into tight curves and details. And you can also single layer use the cloth back sandpaper. Again, I fold it to get into the corner like this. Just be aware of the rotation. And you can see a amount of dust coming off, and how much I'm moving with my hands. For this small cove here, what you can do, you can mold your cloth back sandpaper. That's another benefit. You can mold it to the shape you're sanding, but just make sure you're moving constantly. Otherwise you'll burn the sandpaper really fast. And this detail here. So that's the sanding done. I went up to 320 grit in this case. Now I want to point out really important stuff, and that is your first grit is the most important one. So in this case it was 180, so 180 will remove all the blemishes, dips and valleys, although want to make sure that I don't have that and I have the best possible finish straight from the tool. However, your first grit is the most important one. Every other grit after that will remove the scratches from the previous one, and you want to make sure that those grits are those scratches are gone, because if you skip, let's say one grit, let's say I've skipped 240 grit and went straight to 320 after 180, and I just lightly go over the surface, you will see deeper scratch patterns from 180 grit, because the 320 was too of a fine paper to remove those scratches. Now if I spend more time with this one, I will remove them eventually, but again, you're wasting time, you're not efficient, and that's why we don't skip grits. Now a little bonus tip: if you want, you can use compressed air to blow off the surface after each sandpaper. I don't find it necessary, but you can do that, because sometimes on the cheaper sandpapers the grits can dissolve a little bit and those stay in the wood, and every other sandpaper after will leave those scratch marks, so just be aware of that. Now there is an old trick that old masters like to do, and that is grab a bunch of shavings and polish when the lathe is running. That will do some of the polishing, but also remove some of the scratches as well. So it's a good little trick to do. So just turn on the lathe, make sure you sand it properly, grab a bunch of shavings and just polish it up a little bit. You'll see a little bit of shine coming through, but also you will remove some of the small scratches or imperfections. So, and that's our spindle, nicely sanded, nice and clean, with just a tiny bit of shine. Not sure if you can see it here, maybe on the camera. So let's move to the next step. Same procedure here, although we have to deal with the end grain first. Now what I like to do for stuff that I have to sand the end grain, now usually I would not sand two surfaces together. What I mean by that is I would either sand here, this portion, or this portion, or the side grain on the inside, or the end grain. That's usually what's happened, but in this case what I like to do is use a cloth back sandpaper, but also you can tear it in half. Now it's a little bit smaller, and again fold it in three, and what I like to do is bend like this. I can put my finger like so, I can sand the bottom, but also like I said, you don't want to sand really much on the end grain, and this one is cut relatively clean, so it won't need much sanding, so this will be plenty enough. So bend it like so, goes into the box, and now you sand while this is spinning. Now be aware, if you go over the top, it will bring your finger down and it can be quite painful, so you have to be aware. Again, you're responsible for your own safety, and if you're not comfortable sanding like this with your finger or hand, then you can use either a pad or something else to hold your sandpaper at correct position. So I'll just first start the lathe, again fold it like so. This fold area will go into a corner nicely. See here, I'm sanding the bottom, and as I push it up to the end grain, I lift it up a little bit and move out. Again, you don't want to stay in one area too long, so move around, and I will have to turn on the dust extractor. Again, you'll see here, if I go over the top, it wants to pull my finger down, and it can do it in a sudden motion, which is not very pleasant. You constantly have to be aware of the rotation, and I constantly moving the sandpaper in and out, over, down, and once I feel the sandpaper is getting heated up, switch to another part, bend it over, and And you can always leave the box to cool down a little bit if it's getting too warm. Stop the lathe, let's see the progress. So that's looking quite good. A little bit more sanding in this area here. Show you a little bit different angle. So the end grain is quite good, so I'll now just focus a little bit more on the side wall here. And you can go in reverse as well. Now everything changes obviously, so be aware of rotation. I'll find a fresh bit of sandpaper. Now I haven't touched this portion, so do that a little bit. Turn on the rotation back to forward. Again, you can see I'm constantly moving around. Now this is getting warm, so I'm switching to the outside. This is now worn out, so grab another half of that sandpaper. Key point, important stuff that I want to mention. I think Richard Rathman said it nicely. Use sandpaper like you've given a lifetime supply of it. What that means is don't overuse it. Don't use this for few days constantly, like every day for 8 hours, because it won't be a sandpaper anymore. It doesn't work to be finer grit or anything like that. Once the grit is gone, it's gone. So it will only bring you the bad stuff, the heat, which will then crack the wood and so on. So don't overuse it. So now I'll just polish up the blank and be aware again of that rotation. And since the box is warm, let's put beeswax on top. So that will finish up the box, or this lid or base, whatever it's going to be, nicely. Let the wax melt it. Now see the outside nicely, and the inside. You can see that's quite lovely. A little bit more sanding with 180 grit. You can see here in the corners, so just a little bit more time. But before the finish, you always want to check the surface before, so just make sure of that. But that's how you sand the boxes or anything similar like this. Now let's deal with the flat portion like this. So wood turning is usually about the shape, about the curves and everything like that, but we also deal with the flat surfaces like this, or there is a need always for one like this. So to maintain this flat surface, now it's scraped pretty much flat, or the flat as I can go, but that's pretty darn good. Now what I would use is either a block of wood and then sandpaper. You can use whatever roll you have, but it's again creature comfort to have stuff like this and a pad like this to help you out. So here I have 320 grit, so that's too fine. We'll start with 180 grit, and I've used this one already on something, and again place it like this and we sand away. Or you can use that high density form. You just want something that stays flat, doesn't conform to all the micro dips and valleys that we have here. So this will work quite lovely. And now this will spin like this, and I want to go against rotation on top, but you also see me move down here. Mostly the reason is I transfer the heat or the position where I'm sanding on the pad a little bit on the right, on the left, and so on, or the pressure changes. So you again constantly moving around. I'm not just holding it here on one place and stay there. So always move around. Now there is nothing wrong using just a a piece of sandpaper like this. However, you want to make sure that you fold it so you have a little bit more padding between your fingers and the pressure, because if I'm placing like this and let's say I'm putting more pressure with my finger here, then I'll be digging a little trench, let's say microscopical one, but it won't be flat anymore. So usually block like this works the best. Now you can use this not just on the flat like this, but you can use it if you have the straight sides like this. You can sand it, which we're going to do in this case as well. Dust extractor. Again, I'm moving quite a lot. What I like to do is go not past the center, but to this point, almost through the center. That way I'm sanding the center as well, because in the center the wood is not moving as fast and on the outside, so you can create a hump. And we can sand the side. This block will keep it nice and flat. So that's 180 grit. Again, the first grit is the most important one. So that looks really good. Let's see the side here. Also really good. Now, so whenever we have a cross grain orientation like this, so the grain is running across the bedways, we want to use the feature of the lathe in reverse as well. What happens is when we sand across the grain in one way, the fibers will lay in one orientation, and when we put it in the reverse, then we go in other direction and we cut those fibers up, and the surface is much more smoother, and usually the tear out, in some cases the lighter tear out can happen if we go in a certain direction, and when we sand in one direction it won't go away. So we have to put it in reverse to sand that away. So this is now spinning in reverse. And sand the side. Change to 340, oh sorry, 240. So that's pretty good. We have a concentric lines of the sanding, which is normal. Moderate pressure. You don't have to force it, but also don't be super light like this. So you have to use some pressure, a little bit of it. Again, I'm constantly searching for a fresh bit of paper that will cut much faster and cleaner with less heat, and constantly moving around. While here I'll just sand also the pad. If you want to put a chamfer like this, just hold the pad in one spot, in one position, and you'll get a nice chamfer, quick and easy. And final grit. Again, you can go back in reverse to lay the fibers down. These scratches here that you see, or I hope you can see, those are perfectly normal. Now I'll use inertia sander to remove those, or you can use the shavings, but here in the very center where the wood is not moving as fast, shavings won't help much. Now what inertia sander will do for you is it will spin with the rotation, and it will reduce any scratches that it's on the surface. So it's a really cool stuff, and I know some like to only sand with this without the drill. Again, I like to sand with hand pretty much on the outside, and I use inertia sander to blend it and to remove any scratches from the hand sanding. Now to use this, it's actually pretty simple. I like to tilt it so you don't use it flat on a piece of wood like this. So you use only a portion either to right or to the left, and that way, let's turn on the lathe slowly. So when you push the pad on the wood, it will start to spin with the rotation, and that way you sand. Obviously when you go to the center, it moves much slower, and when you go away from the center, it moves faster and faster and faster. Same here, so position it on one side, so on the middle there's no point, so you have to go on one side or the other side. And again, you can see you can sand it like this. I'll turn on the dust extractor, and you'll see the difference between the used, pretty worn out sandpaper. This is 400 grit, and with the fresh one. So this is again worn out 400 grit, and you'll see the difference in shine and surface when we use this instead of freshly 400 grit. And you just have to find the spot where this will align rotation with the rotation of the ball here. And that way in the middle you'll also get a little bit of sanding action. So that's with the worn out few passes, and it's not bad at all. But it's a little bit too shiny, sort of polished instead of sanded. So when I grab, and we don't throw this one yet out, you'll see why. So grab fresh bit, and you'll see the difference. This will get much gray surface. That's the big difference. You can see the difference in color, and we can do the side as well, and the chamfer. Now this is properly sanded surface, so without scratches or scratches that my eye can see, and here on the side as well. Let me show you this. So you can see 4 pieces that this was glued up, so you can see really nice side and face here, and let's see how flat it is. And you can see that's pretty darn flat. There's no major dips and valleys, so that's pretty good. I'm really happy with this. Now I said we don't throw this one out. The reason why, we can pop the grain here. Now what that means is, let me just grab something. Usually if the stuff will be utilitarian, like a salad bowl or a portion size salad bowl, or plate or whatever, stuff like that, what I like to do is use a little bit of water to raise the grain. So here you have a little water, paper towel, and just again turn on the lathe and just briefly go over the surface. Now this will evaporate really quickly. Just leave the lathe on. Now you can speed up slightly the evaporation of the water or drying off the water by just lightly go with the fingers or paper towel, just to bring a little bit more heat on the wood. A little bit, don't go crazy obviously, and that should be okay. That's dry enough. And now on some timbers like maple, once you get it wet, it will get really fuzzy. especially during the first wash. Now the good thing is, after use and more use, it will get much smoother, but you can mostly prevent that from happening by raising the grain before you oil it. So this is now a little bit rougher, not by much, but we're going to use that worn out paper in an inertia sander and go one more time lightly, and you can use it without inertia sander. Just lightly go. You don't want to sand too much, because then we get to another bare wood. So this is now properly finished, let's say, cutting board. And hope you can now see under the raking light the side and the face here. Everything looks super nice without scratches or anything. So hopefully you can see that clearly. And again, this has now raised the grain. We cut that raised fibers again, and this is now ready to be oiled. So this is how I go about on flat surfaces like these, and now we can focus on the bowl, and that will be it. So here what I have is a lovely piece of Norway maple. Is rough out, but it was quite thin. I'm not sure why I left it like that. So you can see on one spot, here we go, it's quite bendable, so should be quite interesting when we hollow it out. It should be really thin one. Now you can approach this with, from several angles. Now you can use a pad if you like on an outside surface, so sand like this, but the pad get this rounded profile here, so you won't get into a corner. You can use a drill attachment like this, but whenever I have a foot like this or details, this is way too aggressive, and I will show you how to use it on the outside. However, again, I would not go here in the very corner, because you will remove that nice crisp corner. It will be more of a rounded profile, and same goes here on the details like this. This is way too aggressive for sanding stuff like this, so the hand sanding for this, but again, I go hand sanding on pretty much all of the outside, pretty much always. So I'll sand by hand with cloth back sandpaper. You fold it like so through the width, this, and this will be now a great demonstration of too high of a speed when you're trying to sand. So it does sand, you can see the cloud of dust on the other side, but I feel the wood is sort of gliding through the sandpaper. It's not actually catching on the grain, so just bring the speed down a little bit. This is now running at 1300 RPM, and this is now much better. I feel much more friction. And again, you can sand here on the bottom, and this will direct the shavings right into the dust hood, or you can go here. Just be aware of the rotation again. You can see the nice powerful dust extractor. It picks up the dust from this side and pulls it on the other side. So that's just a few seconds with 180 grit. The details, I like to fold it so this area gets a little bit stiffer, so you can sand the foot and again blend here up to the foot. Now to sand the details here, you bend it different way. Again, constantly changing where I'm sanding with the sandpaper. Sand this little button in the middle. These are usually cut quite clean, so doesn't need much work. And you don't want to sand them too aggressively anyway, because they won't look round anymore. They will look flat. So then just a few seconds with 180 grit, using only one side or 1/3 of the paper. So let's see the surface. A little bit more work here on the beads, but the surface here that's done. Doesn't need anything else. So switch to fresh side, and this is a good opportunity to use a single layer or double it only, so I can get a little bit crispier paper, get it in the corner. Again, be aware where you position, because it wants to drag on the other side and it's not pleasant. So don't spend, again, too much time on one spot on the cross grain orientation, especially on the bowl like this, because you will get surface checks, tiny small cracks on the surface, especially here on the end grain. Now, if you remember, I mentioned in my drawer with sandpaper I have these used from the last bowl, so I'll use these on this one. So I don't need 180 grit, especially with the sander this will be too aggressive, so I'll use 240, just to show you how I sand with the drill. So what I like to do, I tuck it, I put my body close to the drill and I move my body, not so much my hands, because hands away from the body are quite loose, let's say. And when the ball is coming down, turn on the blade slowly. You want the rotation or the side of the pad that you're using, in this case I'll be using the right side, going against the rotation like this. This is now properly sanding. If I go the other way, the speed, the drill will just speed up a little bit, but it won't sand much, or it won't sand aggressively, let's say. And with the drills like these, I want to be a little bit more aggressive. So now the speed that you're using this usually is half of your turning speed. So if I turn the ball on at 1000 RPM, I'll be sanding at 500 RPM. Now sometimes I sand at full speed, but it's much better, since this can create a lot of heat, to sand at least half of the speed. So this is now 750 RPM. Crank the speed. So you can see that's pretty good job, really fast, really does the great job here. But if I go into a corner here, I will mushroom it, so I like to keep away. So I'll finish this with hand sanding. I'll speed up a little bit and then we'll focus on the inside. For the outside finishing stage, what I like to do is use inertia sander to remove the sanding marks from hand sanding, and I usually use one grit higher or the last grit that I've used. In this case, this is 400 grit. And here on the bottom, I usually just go lightly over the wider area like this here, and just lightly over the beads. And here just crank the speed up. I can roll this because it's less aggressive. I can roll it into the corner. Again, I'm using only the right portion. A little bit moderate pressure. And this is now nicely sanded outside. As you'll see, I hope that's really nice surface, apart from these cracks here obviously, but everything else is nice and clean. And now I can see this is where the crack is and one here. So, but the rest of it is okay, and I think I could hollow this out thin without any problem. So I'll just switch it around. This should be interesting since we have those small cracks. So bring the speed up a little bit more. Okay, that's the top portion, quite okay. Okay, it's a little bit thicker from this point, so I can thin it down a little bit more. Don't want to go crazy thin for this demo. Lovely shavings. Let's see the surface here. I have a little hump here and I might leave it. Excellent tool finish. I might leave it for the sanding opportunity to show you how to blend these. Now, as you can see here, I have a little bit of tear out, and I'm going to leave it. I think it's a little bit more closer to what maybe a beginner might face. So just to show you how to sand the inside. So again, we want to go with a part of the pad. I'll be using 180 grit, by the way. With the pad going in the opposite direction of the ball. So ball will be coming down, and I want the pad on the drill to spin in the other direction. So if I'm using the right portion of the pad, then I'll be going to the right like this, and I'm tilting, so I'm using again only the right portion of the pad like this. But also I can go in this direction to the left. The ball is spinning down, and this portion now of the pad I'm using, and that portion goes against the rotation. So it only depends how you position this. Are you using the left side of the pad or the right? You cannot use all of the pad at once like this. I mean, you can on the flat surface, but here it's much more difficult to control. So since it's thin ball, I'll just support it with my hand. So the sides here are pretty much sanded, but you can see here where a little bit of tear out has left here. So we have two options. We can continue on with this used 180 grit, or what I can do is go down one grit to 120, and that will smooth out everything. This is 120 grit, and you can use the drill. You don't have to turn on the lathe to get rid of the big tear out here. Again, use only one side of the pad. Okay, so the tear out now is sanded away, so we have a little dips and valleys. So we'll turn on the lathe now and we'll smooth everything out with 120 grit. ball is coming down, I'm using left side which goes up to the rim here. Okay, that feels quite good. Yeah, that's a little bit more here. We can go in reverse as well, but we have to switch the drill in reverse as well. Again, now ball is going in that direction and we want to have the drill going in the opposite. Now fresh bit of 180 grit and this will be done in no time. So this is 220 grit, but it's used, so I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. So let's take it out of the chuck. Okay, so now we can see the inside. Everything is nice and clean without any marks or anything. Nice flowing curve. And the outside also, we only have these teeth marks from the chuck because again, this I didn't make the foot for any of the chuck that I have. So and the bottom I forgot to show. So everything is cut cleanly and ready for the oil. So I hope you like this sanding tutorial video, and there are a few sort of hints or tips to remember when sanding. So always keep the abrasive moving. When it comes to abrasive, buy only the premium brands, and if you can, for the wood turning at least, try to buy cloth bag sandpaper because it's much more versatile, but don't be afraid of using paper bag like I've shown you here. It can be used on cross grain work, on bowls as well, so it's a quite versatile paper as well. Just be sure that you get from the quality brands like Klingspor, 3M, Hermes, Sia, and Indasa, or whatever there are few of those. And don't keep the abrasive on one particular spot for too long, especially on bowls, because you will introduce the heat checks, and those are really hard to get rid of or impossible. So try to keep the overall heat to minimum as much as you can. Obviously the sanding process, the friction and everything will introduce heat, that's inevitable. However, too much of the heat again can cause cracks, splits, and nothing good can happen from that. So if you feel the bowl is getting really hot, turn off the lathe, let it cool down a little bit. It won't take too long, like Richard Raffin said, and I think he quote maybe even Vic Wood, if I'm not mistaken. Use sandpaper like you've been given a lifetime supply. So don't overuse it. Don't use one sandpaper for 10 bowls, let's say, because at the end it won't do anything other than polish up the surface, and you want the surface to be sanded instead of polished. Polishing goes through higher and higher grits, not with 180 grit. So when your 180 grit or 120 leaves a really shiny surface, then you either have a too high of a speed on the lathe or the paper is well overdue. So that's the other thing with the speed. You don't want to have too high of a speed. So if you have having a sensation like the sandpaper is just gliding over the surface, then it's too high of a speed. So you want to feel the friction, you want to feel like a sensation that the sandpaper is sort of pulled out of your hands, if that makes sense. You want to have that little bit of resistance, and that's your sweet spot. Usually when I sand the inside, I like to bring the speed half of the speed that I was turning. So again, if I'm using like 1500 RPM, I'll be using for sanding 750. So that works out for me quite well. Usually well, honestly, most of the time I sand at full speed, but I would either bring the speed of the drill a little bit down as well, so that can also help you out a little bit. So just make sure when you're sanding, if you're using either the left side of the pad, the right or the bottom or the top, that you're going against the rotation of the bowl. That way you'll get the best results using a drill. Drill is, for me at least, a really aggressive way of sanding, which I really like. But on the outside, where most of the details are, especially on boxes and bowls on the near the foot, you don't want to use drill. You want to use hand sanding to get or to keep those details nice and crisp. So hope you like this tutorial on sanding. If you do, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and as always, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.